Awesome. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the LeapShip Startup Builder live Q&A, the ultimate space where founders come together and answer real questions and startup challenges. This is where we dive into questions that keep you awake at night, uncover issues from great guests and industry experts, and tap into LeapShip's own battle-tested startup builders who've guided hundreds of founders across more than a decade. G'day to everyone. I'm your host, Kirk Drage. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at LeapShip. At LeapShip, we're on a mission to flip that 95% failure rate, making expert personalized startup building guidance accessible and affordable to founders everywhere around the world. So whether you're just getting started or you're scaling fast, this is a great place to be. If you're a founder that's just joined us, thank you for joining. It's fabulous to have you here. This show is all about supporting you to move from idea, getting that business model hypothesis that's really worth scaling and understanding what that means, validating that you actually can scale, and then scaling you up to success. Thank you for those of you who have sent questions in. If you have questions during the show, if you're on YouTube or you're on LinkedIn, please drop them into the comments. We'll take them live during the show. Today, I am so pleased to welcome our guest, Tim Kelly. Tim is an aeronautical engineer, social entrepreneur, director of manufacturing director at the Manufacturing Excellence Forum. That's a mouthful, Tim. On the Sunshine Coast. With over 2 decades of international experience, Tim has contributed to world-class aerospace programs such as the Lockheed Martin F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, and the Airbus A350. His career has taken him across the USA, Germany, Netherlands, and Australia, where he's applied deep expertise in systems engineering, digital transformation, and advanced manufacturing. Tim holds a Bachelor of Aeronautical Engineering and an MBA, and is a chartered engineer and a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. Today, he's also an adjunct fellow at the University of Sunshine Coast, which is where we met, where he mentors students and leads the eVTOL student team program. I'm very jealous of that, and we got to talk about that. As a director at MEF, he's spearheading efforts to build advanced, sustainable, and sovereign manufacturing capabilities across Australia, helping innovators, founders, and industry leaders turn ideas into high-impact and commercially successful solutions. Tim, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, mate, and thanks for the lovely intro.
Pleasure. You've done a lot. I'd love to hear about a bit of your background. You've got some amazing headline acts there with the Lockheed Martin F-35 is obviously the top for me. That's a pretty impressive piece of kit.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was a great experience. I was really fortunate when I graduated. That program was running. There were a bunch of other really big programs running internationally as well, like the A350 was running, and then 787 was running, and so there was a shortage of aeronautical engineers worldwide, and then little old Australia ended up getting a good chunk of work from Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman on the F-35 program. And yeah, I was lucky enough to get pulled into that and got sent over to El Segundo in LA for a little while to work on it over there as well. And it was some pretty next level stuff in terms of the way that they're doing it over there. It was great to be able to see it all. And like you and I were discussing before, Kirk, like these big organizations and the way that they're structured and how things scale, and the contrast to startups and ideation and bringing an idea to life. It's just so different.
Yeah. You must have seen some things on your journey. How do you sort of think about the future, given your background? I mean, software's sort of stolen the limelight a lot in the last few years, right? At the end of the day, we live in the physical world. We need physical stuff. Tell us a little bit about your passion in manufacturing and why you're sort of bullish about what's to come based on what you've seen.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so for me, so much of our long-term prosperity and opportunity for next generations is going to be rooted in being really good at making stuff. And for me, we're not going to be good at making everything, and at the moment, we're not really all that good at making many things. So narrowing in on the places that we are good at and starting to expand that out, I think is going to be really important. The nations that do a really good job of this, obviously, there's a massive amount of investment into manufacturing because it is a strategic capability at a national level. The countries that are lucky enough to have really good natural resources do this really quite well. I think Scandinavian countries in particular, we obviously have really good natural resources, but potentially don't reinvest them in the way that we potentially could, to help to create more great businesses that have significant IP. And there's nothing against service-based businesses at all. I think they're really, really important. But I think having a good proportion of our businesses be products-driven and be, at least cyber physical systems, if not hardware systems, is really important too. And there's a range of different reasons for why that's going to be important over the long term. Yeah. That's really what motivates me, and obviously looking to the future and having kids and stuff like that, and trying to understand, okay, what kind of world is going to be compelling for them to want to be a part of, and how to maximize their opportunity. And I think one area that we just don't have enough opportunity in is around hardware products and hardware-based businesses,
100%.
or businesses that have some hardware element to them.
So, and you get into some of those questions about the future, but for the founders that are joining, particularly for those founders sort of new to the manufacturing space and maybe have ideas to build products and services in the manufacturing space, I wanted to ask you, reflecting back on your career, where you've been involved in these projects that have taken products to market and commercialized. What's been some of the the seminal experience that you've really drawn on over your career that really sort of helps you understand now how you help people take products and services to market?
Yeah, no, really good question. I mean, for me, the main thing is probably using the use of design thinking as a principle. So the one that I leverage really heavily is the double diamond approach, because I really like that idea of diverging and then converging around the problem first, and really understanding the problem really well in a really solution-independent manner. That piece where you're understanding the problem in a solution-independent manner is very consistent with systems engineering in terms of requirements management and those kinds of things. So I can obviously relate to it from that perspective. Yeah. But I think as engineers, we get drilled into us how to solve X plus Y equals Z. And generally speaking, you're given X and Y. Yeah. And that skill set has really limited utility. Yeah. It's not really where all the value is created. Most of the value is created in figuring out what the equation is, like what's the 100%. Problem. And that's really up about, lots of ambiguity. Everything's extremely open. Most engineers really struggle in that kind of space. And so I think, being better at operating in those areas where there is heaps of ambiguity, and being able to create some kind of structure out of, and some amount of sense, and then narrowing in on something, in spite of all that openness.
Is that something you experience through, working on some of these big projects? Is that you sort of experience that in real life? Because that's the core of what we do every day. But
right, yeah, and it's super valuable. And no, not at the big organizations. Everything is narrowed down. You pigeonhole. You're a little cog in a really big machine. And and I think that's. Don't get me wrong. There are some benefits to that. The scope and scale of the projects that these organizations deliver is phenomenal, and the fact that more of them, like the 737 MAX flew into the side of a mountain because they got it wrong. But the fact that more of that, that is the exception and not the rule, I think is a testament to how well a lot of these big businesses are run ultimately, especially in aerospace. But most of the learning around that from my side really came through going and then working with, a significant number of small and startup and micro and all those kinds of businesses, doing the MBA and getting a better grounding in some of the theory, and then applying the theory to see where it works and where it doesn't. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was a big perception shift from my perspective personally, is in understanding how to go about being good at defining problems and then making them engageable for a broader group, and then making them commercial.
Is that challenge, that challenge of working in that fuzzy problem definition space, is that being fixed at the education level in the university degrees when people are learning engineering now? Is that
not in engineering? No, I think in other courses to an extent, but I think just by virtue of how fuzzy it is, it's really hard for them to do a good job of teaching it in a formal way. You can have some frameworks and things like that are useful, but learning by having a go at it, I think, should be the format that's the most encouraged. Yeah, and especially for young people where there's just so little to lose by going and starting a business, and trying to not fall afoul of the analysis paralysis piece. Understand, and this I think is a minimum viable product kind of a discussion in a broader sense, but at a business level, not just at a product level. because the idea of going and understanding the crap out of everything is just a total misnomer. I mean, it's to go and do a plan is really, really important, but then, you know, the plan's not going to survive contact with reality anyway. And going, all right, well, now what are we going to do and how are we going to adjust and what have I learned in the process? That's probably the most valuable bit.
100%. I mean, it's where we spend all of our time with entrepreneurs, helping understand, you know, what's the problem space, you know, your perception, even if you're an expert, if you're doing something that you've been doing your entire life, what customers want versus what you want are generally very different things, aren't they?
And then how technology changes it when it comes on board, and all of a sudden, like, how much of your experience is still relevant. And
something else I love about the manufacturing space, given, you know, my roots are in the manufacturing space, and then I moved into software, the discipline that you have to have when you're building physical stuff, because of the very real costs that are involved and the very real timelines involved in shipping stuff around, that we don't have to deal with in the software space. So we get to do a bunch of shortcuts. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that sort of discipline from real world physical product design sort of helps with being a better product and designer and building commercial products because of some of that discipline?
I guess so. I mean, I've never really thought about it in those terms, but you're 100% right. I haven't. I've seen plenty of cases where there hasn't been a whole lot of discipline, and it just costs a shitload of money, and you know, and schedules and budgets flow over, and scopes aren't met, and you know, that's especially when you're developing something that's brand spanking new and you're doing a lot of outsourcing. That's the norm. And I'm not saying, oh, we should just accept it. I'm also not saying, okay, well, let's just jack everything up by 50%, because then that re-anchors perceptions in a different spot. I think, you know, being relatively aggressive about it. And one of the things I've learned the hard way a number of times is that you almost need to have one schedule for your supplier and another schedule for your customer, and never shall either of them see either one's schedule, so that you've got your buffer in there on scope, schedule, and budget as much as possible. But I mean, when like we're dealing with this at the moment, and we've helped an organization to design and manufacture a safety device in the logistics industry, and we're making hundreds of them now, and there's a whole bunch of them that need to go to Canada. And I've got a broker for logistics, and you know, I just can't get them to nail down I had a quote and it was fine, got the green light from the customer, all that, and the thing expired, and got to start it all again, and it's gone up, and all these kinds of shenanigans. It is just incessant, and the amount of variables are really high. Like, even when you think, okay, we're through all of the worst of it in terms of variability, like, we've got a product, we know that it works, we've tested it, we've rolled it out domestically, it works, all that's fine now. And now it's just it's savage, like, as opposed to transfer file.
You've got all these friction points on getting the raw materials together in the supply chain, and then you've got all these friction points in actually getting finished product out to customer as well. So you got to deal with it on both sides, don't you? You've got to deal with things like packaging. I know, when I first got involved in building physical products, like, the amount of time that we had to spend on designing and testing packaging, so that the insurance companies would insure it and the freight companies would take it. Like, that was a huge blind spot for me. I didn't even know it was a thing.
That's it. Yeah, well, most of the time it's kind of the last thing you think about. It's like, okay, we've got a good product, and that's it. And then, as you say, especially when it's like FMCG stuff, there's a lot of really heavy expectation around that. I haven't had to play too much in that space personally, which has been really nice. It's all been, relatively heavy industry kind of stuff, and pretty bespoke, and not thousands in terms of volume, typically, outside of some of the big aerospace stuff. But no, it's not
fabulous. No, you've got an amazing background. Now we met on the Space to Sea program. We're both working together on the Space to Sea program, and you're obviously an adjunct fellow there at University of Sunshine Coast. Tell us a little bit about the university and their role in the region, and then let's talk a little bit about the program.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I mean, UniSC is a relatively young uni in the scheme of things, but I think what it's done in terms of being an asset to the region has been immense. I mean, there can always be discussions around, is it doing as much as it could be doing? But I think the idea of it not being here, for me, is would be really sad. Like, I think the overall opportunity and the ongoing prosperity of our region would be significantly diminished without having the university here. So from that perspective, it's great. I'm obviously pretty heavily involved in the engineering side of things, engineering school, and trying to, in particular, help them to connect more with industry. Some of the things that are really lacking in engineering graduates, and this is across the country, it's not just UniSC, but is really good applied industry knowledge. There's some pretty gaps there. And also just practical skills, like being able to get on the tools and actually make things. You might be thinking, well, what the hell's an engineer doing if they're not learning how to make things? And it's like, well, they're learning everything except that most of the time. So, lots of time on computers and lots of time writing reports and not much time making stuff. And that's really a cost and a liability thing as much as anything. Yeah. So we try to fill that gap as best we can around that. And the Space to Sea accelerators, it's a great program too. I mean, it's really about supporting, companies through this valley of death. It's trying to minimize their failure rates as they bring these products to the market. And I guess the theme around these particular companies is really anything between space and sea. And so, whether it's geospatial intelligence or it's autonomous vehicles, there's a really great range of organizations in that space that are doing some phenomenal things and, doing more phenomenal things because of the support of yourself and the team, Kirk.
Yeah, it's fabulous. It's great to work with, the companies. They're doing some amazing things. I think about, 4.0, some of the work they're doing on safety on train platforms, using advanced sensors. There's some really seriously impressive stuff, and they're the kind of solutions that we can build here locally and then we can export to the world.
Yeah, we've got to tell those stories more. We've got to support those companies better because, as you say, what the guys, just that one organization, impact of that's going to be massive and has a huge global applicability, scales infinitely, really. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we need to be doing as much as possible.
I just love working with founders so much on real commercial, customer-driven opportunities rather than tinkering with things in the background. It's the maker clubs are fabulous, and I wish I had more time to play in that space. But what really gets me out of bed is actually working with customers and solving real world customer problems that have got that joint social impact as well as the financial impact. If you can overlay those two things on that Venn diagram, you're going to be in a pretty good space in terms of doing something meaningful and purposeful.
Yeah, I agree.
Beyond your role at the university there, obviously the MEF is a huge part of what you do. Tell us a little bit about that and why that exists and how that operates.
Yeah, so I think going back to, I guess, the first part of the conversation, we were having, really strong drive from my side to try to create more sovereign capability here in Australia. And setting up and running a not-for-profit to do that made sense. And the council, I moved from the Netherlands to back to Australia in mid 2016, and I was engineering director at a local company here, and got to know the council well, and left that company. And the council said, "Well, do you want to stand up and run this thing?" I'm like, "Well, what is it?" They're like, "Well, I don't know. You figure it out." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's call it the Sunshine Coast Advanced Manufacturing Network." But that acronym was SCAMN, SCAMN. And I'm not in marketing, but I was told that was poor form. So then we figured out that we do something different. It ended up on the MEF, which was great. And so we run events every month, and we get 100 or so people come along to the events, and they're always at a manufacturer, and it's always promoting them and helping manufacturers to learn from other manufacturers. And that really has built the soft infrastructure, the culture, the connectedness of our ecosystem now. The amount of work that goes on because of that. Like, I did an analysis of my email just for this calendar year so far, and just on email I've made about 1,000 introductions between different businesses in our ecosystem up here, and how much work that's led to, and how much economic activity and how many jobs that's helped place or work created or whatever. Is like, we're trying to go and understand the magnitude of it, because we want to be able to report better on what the impact is that we're having. But we know that it's really significant, and manufacturing now accounts for I think it's about 1,500 businesses. It's about 11,000 jobs. It's really the third largest sector behind construction and healthcare, and that flies in the face of most of the rhetoric that's out there, which is manufacturing is dead, especially on the Sunshine Coast. It's like, well, you go there to have a holiday or to die because it's a retirement village. As savage as that sounds, that's often the rhetoric. So we're trying to turn that on its head. Like, no, this is a destination to have an awesome lifestyle and have a great place to raise your kids and give them heaps of opportunity and do some pretty sick stuff at the same time, and bring great products to market and scale them nationally and internationally and move the needle. So that's really what we're driving at. We want to see manufacturing double as a sector by 2030. There's a bunch of different things that we're doing in and around that, apart from all the broader ecosystem work that we do.
And you're working with everything from those established manufacturers, but also you're helping earlier stage startups and scale ups as well, right?
Yeah, very much so. And obviously everyone needs something different. So some of the really big businesses that are 300, 400 FTE, stuff like that, what they need is extremely different, obviously, to what a smaller business is often looking for. And we've got ways that we can help all of them. It just depends on the scope and scale. And obviously our resources are pretty finite, so we kind of just make them go as far as we possibly can. But it's great to have partners, like university is a partner of the MEF, and their support's been fantastic. And there's an awful lot of really great overlap that benefits the MEF and the Innovation Centre here in terms of being able to support businesses. And other partners as well, like Cormatic, who's a systems integrator, National Australia Bank, McPherson Kelly, organisations like that. We've got so many great partners that really, they care about sovereign capability and about manufacturing, and we're really privileged that we're in a position where we can help them to move the needle on that front.
Yeah, I think you're talking to you before the show, those partners that you've got, and the fact that they're doing this to support the development of that sovereign capability. I think it's fabulous, because we need to diversify and get more complexity in our economy, don't we? It's really critical. We're going to need.
Yeah, our economic complexity, Harvard or MIT, I think, are the two atlases, and we're down around the 100 out of 140 something mark on economic complexity. And most people
hard to get your head around. You think about Australia as an advanced nation, don't you?
What's that, sorry?
It's hard to get your head around. You think about Australia being a relatively advanced nation, where we're kind of in the top 10, top 20 of so many indexes, but this one we're behind some countries that you wouldn't believe that we're behind.
Pakistan, Senegal, more advanced than we are on this front, and it's all because our GDP is made up of mining, agriculture, and tourism, and we don't reinvest it strategically. Whereas we're at the moment we're playing the pokies with our economy, and with our future, which is nonsense. But we need to do something to change it.
For anyone that's sort of watching this thinking, but there's so much capital involved in making things, and you need big factories and you need teams of people, how can I even break in? Can you talk a little bit about how things are changing so that it's actually easier for people to get involved? And the term advanced manufacturing, on one hand, it sounds really cool, but it also sounds a little bit scary and expensive, and maybe
super nebulous, for sure. And it means different things in different contexts. It is really hard. And in Industry 4.0, for most manufacturers, the terms advanced manufacturing and Industry 4.0 become kind of dirty words, because government's smashing it with them, and then consultants smash them with them, and then it's expensive to try and stand up, and and it doesn't always work, especially if you don't get the right partners. So I understand why. The cost of labor in our country, again, because we are so pumped up through mining, agriculture, and tourism and things like that, obviously makes us less competitive. And so we need to find ways to fight those headwinds and be smarter about it. Some of it's cultural, and the way that we perceive manufacturing, and actually perceiving it nationally as a strategically critical sector, because it is. And then the other part is finding ways economically to overcome it. And starting a manufacturing business is actually nowhere near as hard as what most people think, especially if you've got a product idea. You patent it, you protect it properly, or even if you just get your suppliers on non-disclosure agreements, and you start that way, and you build up revenue, and then you reinvest over time to vertically integrate the capabilities to start bringing all of your cost centers down and increasing your profit margin. Obviously, it increases the complexity. But at the same time, if you're strategically vertically integrating the stuff that you need, so it might be that you need to be powder coating your product, which is spraying it with a really fine plastic powder and then baking it in an oven, and it's phenomenal levels of protection, extremely durable, really great looking finish. Can be horrendously expensive, very automatable. And so you might go, all right, well, we're just going to go and vertically integrate the powder coating side of it. We'll still outsource all of the extruding, cutting, welding, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And you can kind of gradually build on that through time. And whether you go and then offer that capability as a service or you keep it for yourself specifically for your product, I don't think we do enough around automation as a means of leveraging our facilities and infrastructure at significantly higher rates by running it multiple shifts, per day, and getting up to close to 6 or 7 days a week, really, really leveraging that resource. The business case stacks up so fast around this stuff. And that's just, I'm talking about a reinvested earned revenue model. I'm not even talking about debt funding, which is a great way to do it. Highly recommended. Like, for me, better than grants. If you're approaching a grant as something that is a nice to have 6, 12, 18 months in the future and will give you a really good boost, but isn't something that's a dependency on your business, then grants are good. Maybe. Yeah. You still got to pay that. Like, I would recommend paying to have it written. If you've never written a grant before and you're doing it yourself, the probability that you win is so low that you may as well just not bother doing it. I don't mean to sound defeatist around it, but it's just the reality of it. There's a lot of other people there that are going to be competing for that grant who will probably do a really, really good job of it. And so getting the right help is really important. But, for me, debt funding is closer to free money than grant funding. And the main reason for that is the opportunity cost of the time of the business, in terms of not just writing the grant, but waiting for it to be announced, seeing if you've won or not. Then you've got to sign the contract. And at that point, once you've signed the contract, if you're getting a big bit of equipment, then you can put the deposit down and then you wait for the equipment to come. Yeah. So it can be 24 months before the equipment's commissioned, and you wanted it 3 months ago. It's like, just debt fund it.
Exactly. No, that's great advice. And what would you say to startup entrepreneurs that have got a physical product in mind? What's your advice to them for how to get started on that journey if there may be a non-technical founder that's got this idea? What would you say to that kind of person about how to sort of get into the ecosystem and how to start?
Yeah, finding the right partner there, and it might be a person that you're offering sweat equity to that's an industrial designer or a mechatronics engineer or something like that, so that they can go and develop you the product and help get to that minimum viable product stage, whereby you can go and demonstrate the capability of the product and help everyone to understand what the gap in the market is that it's filling. This is assuming that you've already gone and done that work that says, here's the market, here's the gap, and then you prove that, you validate the concept. And then in theory, the level of risk around your business goes down significantly, and the ability to get venture capital, private equity, whatever, goes up drastically. I think just if you're non-technical, trying to find the right partner. It might be like, one of the things I think is a shame, and I've seen a good amount of it, is founders getting like, this is my baby, it's my idea, I want to own 100% of it all the way through. And just trying to fight that urge as much as possible. Owning a lower percentage of a massive pie, generally way better than owning all of it.
100% of nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. The flip side of that is that the level of sophistication and greed around, say, venture capitalists is suboptimal often as well. So trying to find that right balance and then not getting jaded in the process is hard. Yeah. And then trying to build the right team around it as well. Once you've overcome that hurdle, and a lot of people might be like, well, it's just me and I'm side gig and stuff. But at a point, if it works, it really needs to be not just you. And then your ability to bring a team together around you that's really effective, really intrinsically motivated, is aligned to what it is that you're trying to achieve and the vision that you've got. Being able to articulate that vision really well and really clearly to create that intrinsic motivation, because the biggest advantage you've got over all of these other massive companies out there that are looking to innovate all the time is that you're agile, you've got a really engaged workforce that's extremely productive and extremely creative. And so trying to create the environment where you can leverage that to its fullest is one of the most important things that you can do as the leader of the business.
Yeah, such great advice. Such great advice. I think a lot of what you're talking about there, if you're new to this space, whether you come from a technical background, because of course the other issue is if you are technical and maybe you do come from an engineering background, you often have the opposite problem, which is understanding the market and understanding commercials and
correct.
all that kind of stuff. So your advice about getting the right kind of team is kind of critical.
Yeah, everyone's got gaps, and I think being good at understanding what your personal gaps are, building the team around it, and especially in the beginning, finding people that you trust. And like I find that you go further together, and especially finding at least that one other person, maybe two other people that whether it's CEO, CTO, COO, something like that, or however you kind of divvy it up. And then having I don't know if you guys have seen the slicing pie model for equity.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good model. Yeah. And it manages sweat equity really well, and it manages capital injections really well. And nothing's perfect, but I think it's a much better model than a fixed split. Because you'd see this more than me, Kirk, but how many businesses fall over because there's some kind of fixed equity split, and one person feels like, rightly or wrongly, that their contribution is significantly greater than someone else who has the same level of ownership, and then the whole thing falls over.
Yeah, it's
and the opportunity lost. Like, it just sucks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's so much more you can do to learn about the process, and I think this is one of the challenges that entrepreneurs face in general. Whether you're a software person or a hardware person, there's a lot of pressure to race to get to the product stage.
Yeah,
but there's just so much you can learn before you get to that product stage that is going to set you up for success. And like you were saying before, it's the practical things. It's like, get out there, talk to the suppliers, so understanding things like minimum order quantities, understanding things like the different manufacturing processes that you might need in building a product, and what are the trade-offs. And you don't want to be learning about those things like well into your project and trying to make decisions on the hop.
Yeah.
The more you start to learn about those things early, and I think for many entrepreneurs and people that are building physical products in particular, take your time. Take your time to focus on your rate of learning, as opposed to trying to get a product out the door really quickly.
Yeah, and it might be that you try to do it on a really low risk, low cost kind of trial of something first, just so that you can almost put yourself through the paces and start building an understanding of it in a way that's really going to be manageable from both the expenditure of energy, opportunity cost, financial cost perspective, so that you're not learning the hard lessons in crunch times.
100%. We were talking before the show about your experience in big companies. I wonder if I could ask you to reflect on that difference between big companies and large companies, and for those people that haven't worked in large companies, what are some of the benefits and what are some of the downsides? You touched on a few just now about that, employee engagement and culture. Can you just go a little bit deeper in terms of what's the differences and the benefits, and give people a bit of a flavour for how they can think about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think stability and structure, generally speaking, is one of the bigger benefits of working in these big businesses. And like all things, it's a double-edged sword. And what can often happen is you get some real passengers in these organizations, or people that are kind of career bureaucrats and don't really have any interest in the vision or the outcome. And it is really just a matter of being extremely risk averse, and really just all of their decision making is driven by, will this or will this not help with my next performance review and ultimately a promotion. Now there's usually a subset of people who just don't engage with that kind of behavior, and it might be then that's a typical Pareto rule, is that 20% of the people get through 80% of the work. It's extremely true. It's very frustrating, especially when obviously the remuneration, like it just starts getting away from a meritocracy and towards a bureaucracy, and depending on how you're geared and what side of the equation you're on there, it can really be pretty frustrating. And obviously then there's significant cultural implications around that too. And that's where some, businesses will break themselves up into, either different companies or different business units to try to fight that, because some things just don't scale beyond a certain point. But again, I think that's where, for a lot of small companies, the one of the biggest strengths is should be the engagement of the people with the company, with the idea, with the vision, and their level of personal investment in bringing that to life. People like that, and having a cluster, a group of people like that, if it's managed well, will often be one of the key elements to really turning something into a massive success. And I just don't, for me at least, I don't think it's understood as well as it potentially could be, or spoken about enough. And I see it a lot, where amazing people make a big contribution to an organization in spite of not having any equity in the company. And then it gets to a point where the founders will sometimes almost be, in some ways, not fearful, it's not the right term, but just a bit put out by it, and then end up losing them as a result of some kind of an insecurity around it. And it's just such a massive shame.
It's such a big part of success, isn't it? It's about getting the right kind of teams, getting the right kind of motivation, getting the right kind of commitment, and that's often.
And in big businesses, it's really just all around. Well, I've got an org chart. I've got roles planned out. How well do other people fit into my boxes? And typically in startups, I find it's better to go, who's an awesome human that has a skill set that is applicable to my context? I'm going to create a role around them. Now, that's in most HR terms, like, you don't do that, because there's risk of nepotism and just hire your mates. And it's like, I'm not saying do that. But if you go out to market with a relatively broad scope around whatever the role is, and obviously you still be looking around a very particular skill set. So it might be like, well, we have to have a qualified engineer, but I don't really care if it's electrical, mechatronics, or whatever, or computer science. But I'm really looking for an awesome human, and then I'm going to point them at this particular part of it. There's an overlap between where they are and where they're going and what the organization needs, and I'm going to stick them in that overlap area. And if you've got more, you kind of plug the gaps and everything around them.
It's a great way to think about it. It's a really, really good. Yeah, I mean, obviously larger firms don't tend to do that, but in the startup space, it's a great way. It's a great way to think. It's harder to train for that mindset than it is for specific skills. If you don't know a tool or you don't know a process, you can learn that. But if you've got the wrong mindset, much harder to teach, right? It's fabulous.
Yep, absolutely.
And I mean, some of the things you've talked about is sort of the impetus why a lot of people leave corporates and start startups, because they get frustrated and want those benefits of the smaller, agile, more focused, more nimble, more productive, performance-driven teams. But on the other side of the coins, the corporates and governments have some great things that you can learn about what you're eventually going to have to do if you need to scale. What are some of the things that you learnt from being in those larger organizations that you draw in, that you can say to those early stage founders, well, this is where you're heading, and you have a clearer view of where they're going because of that experience?
Yeah, well, I think that point around clarity is probably one of the biggest ones. Like, in some of the organizations that I've worked in that are going through those growing pains, it is typically a lack of clarity around who's doing what are we doing, how are we doing it, what is the plan. The plan's not the be all and end all, but it's a great starting point. And then just a lot of those leadership characteristics that bring people together and point them at a common goal and get that to work. And that's some of the stuff that often goes, it can go extremely well in those big organizations because they're resourced really well. They can get out in front of the problems. They break the problems down to the point where they're really well resourced at an individual role or task level. And that is, again, a double-edged sword. If you want to go beyond yourself and beyond your role, you don't necessarily have the means to do it, but you've always got the resources to do the thing that you need to do. And so that's why, they will typically get there and they can complete these massive projects, like bringing a new aircraft to market and having it fly safely, just because of that process and the amount of rigor and everything around it. And look, there's a number of different organization structures, and people will talk about either flat structures or a system called holacracy, and then bureaucratic hierarchies. That nothing scales as well or as quickly, I don't think, as a bureaucratic hierarchy, just because it's so simple. And it creates such clarity. I just think that there's different levels of I guess either purity or orthodoxy around it, and I would recommend just being a little bit less orthodox around your bureaucratic hierarchy. But the clarity that it creates is really important. And if you have people that have good leadership skills and good management skills at the same time, that are leading those teams at each of those different layers, then it's still going to work really well. It's just typically when you have someone who's a good leader but not a good manager, they can really motivate, but they couldn't organize their way out of a paper bag, or vice versa. You've got people that could be really organized, but they're just so transactional that they can't get people to engage with the problem in an ongoing way, and then just burn them out or whatever.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I certainly learned a lot from my corporate career about just little things like as you're scaling a startup and you're sending people on trips, and it's like we don't have a travel or expense policy. That's a thing that is just normal in a corporate,
right?
Having things like when a partner comes to talk to you, like don't sign NDAs. You've got to get the legal team involved. Working with suppliers and creating agreements and those sorts of things. All of that structure and infrastructure is there to do those in larger organizations. If you've got people that have got that experience as part of the team, it's incredibly valuable. And as you say, getting the right mix of people is so valuable right out the gates.
Agree. I think having an amount of process and policy is really important, and like we were discussing before we started, we just don't, certainly from my perspective, knee-jerk policy that's in response to some lowest common denominator that is not behavior that you would tolerate culturally anyway. Don't recommend that kind of policy. But policy around travelers, like, am I keeping my receipts, or do I have a company credit card? How do I use it? What's in and out? But just treating people like adults, I think, is really, really, really important, and not using policy as a crutch to communicate things that really should be handled at a leadership and culture layer, because people don't want to have hard discussions, and so they do policy instead.
That's so true, isn't it?
A really good way to undermine culture really, really quickly.
Yeah, so true. I'd love to turn to the future of manufacturing and where you see things are going. I'd love to get some insights from you. You must be working with some cool new toys and some manufacturers that have got cool new toys, and just different ways of approaching, not only specific parts of the manufacturing process, but also, manufacturing in general is kind of evolving as we can do things faster. And then maybe get onto that discussion that we were talking about before, which is the machines building the machines. But first, tell us a little bit about where you see manufacturing, heading in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, cool. So this is kind of my take based on what I'm seeing, but in Australia in particular, our adoption of Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0 technologies has been really slow. And that's, if you think Industry 1 is the Industrial Revolution and steam mills and all that kind of stuff, and then, electricity, and then connectivity, and then sensing is Industry 4.0, and Industry 5.0 now is you're getting AI, robotics, all that kind of stuff going on. The adoption for like most Australian manufacturers at Industry 2, Industry 3.0 kind of a level. We're obviously trying to push really hard into Industry 4.0, trying to get productivity per worker up as high as possible, because that's what really predicates competitiveness internationally. So, for example, on the Sunshine Coast, our productivity per worker growth rate over the last 10 years has been 0.3%.
Wow.
Which is gross. So, we've got a lot of work to do there. So pretty much all of our productivity, all of our growth, I should say, in manufacturing has come from FTE growth. But like most parts of the country, especially post-COVID up here, like This has been Sunny Coast has been the recipient of the highest internal migration in the country by a significant amount for a few years running. So trying to bring low-skilled labour up here, it's just not possible in the scheme of things as well. So at the same time, we lose roughly 90% of our high school graduates. They just leave the region to go somewhere else, whether it's to go to UQ or QUT or something like that, or because they don't think there's any opportunity here. So you've got all these companies that are just dying for really capable people, and then you've got this exodus of really capable people.
Yeah.
And obviously, these people living with their parents and stuff like that here could continue to do that if they understood the breadth and depth of the opportunity that was here. It's just a matter of trying to fill that gap, and obviously that's something that we try to do. One of the things that I think that could be really interesting, and it certainly feels like it's shaping up that way as we get towards, artificial intelligence that is more general than it is now. I'm not saying like full AGI or anything like that, but certainly artificial intelligence is more general, and cobots and soon humanoid robotics. My feeling is that there will be a way to bypass some pretty significant elements of Industry 4 and Industry 5 and go straight into what was probably going to be called Industry 6. Or maybe this is part of Industry 5, whether it's a bit blurry in terms of where these things start and stop. But ultimately, a lot of the things that have inhibited adoption of these technologies will be bypassed by the step change that we're going to get in these new technologies coming through. And that should really drastically increase the productivity per worker element. Now, certainly for us, like a lot of people taking jobs and stuff, it's like we don't have enough people. We don't have enough skilled people. There aren't jobs to be taken. There's just productivity to be lost. And will there be retraining that needs to happen around some of this stuff? Yes. Will the robots be stuck doing a lot of the repetitive, monotonous, dangerous stuff? Yeah. Stuff you probably don't want people doing in the first place. It's not that there's going to be zero displacement of people, but I think it's significantly, people tend to think of it in such black and white and absolute terms just because it's so much simpler to do so. But as far as I can see, that certainly won't be the case. And then as productivity growth starts to increase and our competitiveness on an international scale starts to increase, then the amount of prosperity, opportunity, all those things goes up drastically as well. And, we should be in a state where we've got, really good abundance of, I guess, goods in particular. And then it becomes a circularity, sustainability. Really, we don't want to continue to undertake, make, dispose kind of pathway around that either. So it's not like let's just be Temu everywhere all the time. Like that's not what we want at all. But certainly there are, critical, like whether it's medical devices, syringes, other things for health related stuff, for education, there's so many different types of products that we could be making and using here, which drastically improves quality of life without being a cost to the environment. And I think that for me is where we need to be trending towards. And I don't think there's really anything stopping us from doing that in terms of the way that technology is currently progressing. When I say there's nothing stopping us, the biggest risk to us not doing that is ourselves, because we can't see it. We don't know how to engage with it. We're too skeptical of it, and we're trying to protect jobs that we can't fill anyway. I think the needle's moved a lot on that over the last few years as well. Like even on the left-hand side of politics and stuff like that, they're a lot more supportive of automation purely because we don't have any other alternatives. It's just not enough skilled people, even with all the immigration that we're bringing in. Like just in welding alone, I think there's some kind of like 40,000 people that we're short at the moment. And the current average age of most skilled welders is 55.
Wow. Yeah.
So, they're like what's going to happen as they start to retire and they're just not getting backfilled. So, and autonomous welding cells are totally a thing. Cobotic welding is totally a thing. I think humanoids are a long way away from trying to do any welding. But
Yeah.
yeah.
There's also from what I see, this long tail opportunity, like we've seen in software, where we've gone from, a very small number of very large software companies, like a few large CRM companies, for example, to now there's like a CRM for left-handed dentist clinics, right?
Right. Hyper-specific stuff.
Long tail.
I love that. That's super good. I think manufacturing is going to go down a very, very similar pathway. I think in the short term, it'll probably follow a pretty similar kind of a thing to what software's done. And some of the arguments against automation I hear are, well, that's just going to make manufacturers rich. I'm just like, well, what kind of ridiculous argument is that? Like, especially if you do it, like one of the ways that Silicon, you'd know this better than me, that the Silicon Valley really works is that you've got obviously this great talent pipeline out of Stanford, and then you've got this great investment scene, but you've also got so much philanthropy with businesses that have been really successful in reinvesting into new tech startups, both from a time and energy and expertise, as well as a financial perspective. We got to build that. Like, that's just such a great model. And in order to do that, you have to have extremely successful businesses in that sector who give a crap, and it's not just about, I'm going to go get 60 yachts. It's like, okay, I'll have one yacht. Okay, but then I'm going to reinvest like crazy, and I'm going to return the favor to the community. And I don't think we should expect 100% success rate around that, but I don't think we need it either. And that's a cultural thing too, and it could be a national culture thing. I'd like it at a minimum that it's a Sunshine Coast cultural thing. Not an easy thing to ask for, especially because it's extremely indirect. You can't enforce that kind of behavior. You just need to create a climate and a community where it's encouraged, supported, incentivized, all those things.
Yeah, fascinating. It's I think that the future's pretty bright, and it's going to be exciting to see how it unfolds.
We're not going to be bored, mate.
No, that's one thing I say to every founder. We can't guarantee you commercial success, but we can guarantee you won't be bored.
Yeah,
have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we'll learn a lot. And sometimes you win, and sometimes you learn. And more often than not, it's learning before winning.
Yeah, totally.
More iterations, more cycles, like your Microsoft example.
Yep. Yeah. So true. Iterations is everything. If you can get more iterations, more learning, it's about. And look, this is the advice that we give to founders in the early stages. It's about the optimizing your time and capital for the cost of learning. The faster and cheaper you can learn, you're going to outcompete other people. And you see a lot of companies that get huge wads of capital, and their learning rates are really slow, and they just burn through their capital and they're done.
That's it. And then they're like, "Can I have another lot? Thanks." And it's like, "No, you didn't do enough. You haven't come along far." Yeah. Yep.
So no, it's exciting. I love what you're doing. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and before we get to the bottom of the show, and we're nearly there, I'd love to just get your take on a couple of these questions. So I've got one here from Amelia in Sydney to say, we're developing a hardware prototype, but manufacturing quotes are sky high. How can early stage founders make manufacturing more cost effective without sacrificing quality? Yeah,
really good question. And especially if you're in Sydney, it doesn't surprise me at all that it's pretty bonkers as far as that's concerned. And again, that's where there's a few different ways you can do it. I'm not a fan of the outsourcing piece to, internationally at all. Sometimes it is necessary. It depends on what it is. If you're doing injection molded plastic products, you can do that in country, but the cost of the tool is sometimes $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, depending on how big the product is. And that's if you get it made overseas. And if you get it made here, it's obviously significantly more than that. So it's hard. That's why I think, going back to that point I was making about getting a partner is really important. And you probably have to part with some equity if you want to do that. But I think it's then trading off. It's like, well, what's the most important to us now? Is it cash or is it equity? And can I find someone to do it with? And it might be a person, it might be a business. And you might be able to go into some kind of a joint venture or some kind of special purpose vehicle with them, where they either have some kind of license or whatever to the IP. And if they're not transactional about it, if they're behaving in a transformational manner where they're like, "This is awesome. I appreciate you bringing the opportunity to us or to me. I'd love to be involved in this. I really want to support you. Here's what we think is reasonable." and just, good people. That's probably the hardest part of it. There'll be a lot of different companies that'll be selling rapid prototyping services, design services, industrial design services, and stuff like that. It's just trying to find a really good one that you can potentially partner up with, so that you're not just getting totally gouged when you're at your most vulnerable financially, and then you're also not diluting your equity stake too early. And that's where you almost need to have some kind of a good feeling around the value of your organization, so you understand how much equity you're giving away and roughly what the value of that equity is. And because there's always a transaction at the end, but it's just a matter of having enough trust in a relationship to go down that particular pathway.
I guess, as you said earlier, with the Manufacturing Excellence Forum, that's part of part of the big value is those introductions, and I think it's way more important in the hardware space than it is in software, because you often need so many more partners when you're manufacturing as opposed to building software.
Yeah, agree. And we do that kind of thing all the time. So there's an organization that we work with quite a lot now that develops these devices for logistics and stuff. And the main purpose that the Manufacturing Excellence Forum has for them is access to a trusted group of manufacturers that aren't going to take the piss. It's like they're going to give you a no bullshit answer around it, and they're going to do you a solid to kind of get you up and running if that's what's required, because they've been the recipient of similar favors across the board, and they're just paying it forward. And ultimately what will happen is that they'll end up doing a bunch of paid work for that anyway, but it just increases. So it's like, I don't know of a similar kind of a system in Sydney specifically, but in an ideal world, that's the kind of thing that you get, is like really, highly trusted people that have an investment in what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. There is the Australian National Fabrication Facility. Guys might be able to help out with that, of course. One more question is, this is from James in Adelaide. What's the most common mistake you see technical founders make when they transition from R&D to commercial production?
Yeah, great question. Most organizations with hardware products have a really crappy digital twin, and they don't have an explicit bill of materials. And then, you're just like, how many fasteners and washers? Don't know. Just buy boxes of them. Right. Okay. Now, how many are we making? 60. Okay. And you get through 20 and you run out. Crap. What's the lead time? 3 weeks? Jesus. And so getting your design and your digital twin, especially if your assemblies and your sub-assemblies right, is really, really critical. You want something called a configuration management program. It handles all of the automated numbering. Every part should have a unique number. And then in an ideal world, you'd have an inventory management enterprise resource planning system where you push your bill of materials across into it, and it understands it. It'll understand all your stock levels of all your parts. And so when you make a sales order and you push it through into a production order and work orders and then purchase orders, it knows how many of everything you've got, how long it's going to take to get it, where to get it from, how much it's going to cost, and it'll plan out your production. It depends on the system, but semi-autonomously for you. Most organizations go, I've got a product, now I need to make heaps. All right, let's go. What do we need again? And where do I get it from? And it's just, so it is an investment to go, I'm going to make this a really clean digital definition of my product, so that when it goes, when I get a sales order come through from a customer, that engineers don't have to touch it. It just goes straight into production, and people just make it, and they know what they're doing, and they've got standard operating procedures or assembly instructions or whatever it is, and they can just go and build it. The engineers shouldn't be involved once you're going into first of production. Prototype, first of type, yes, because it's not going to work at a TRL 9 on those first few. But by the time it's first to production, it really should be TRL 9, and you shouldn't have any engineers involved. Those guys are nothing but trouble.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And what about design for manufacturing versus design for serviceability? Is that something else?
For sure. And for me, again, if we go back to that design thinking double diamond and you're building out your set of requirements, you should be talking about unit economics, maintainability, serviceability in those solution independent sets of requirements. And you
Yeah.
should be design for manufacture, potentially design for automated manufacture. And that's where you need to have industrial designers and other manufacturing type experts to say that, that should be injection molded versus it should be rotor molded or blow molded, or you should CNC machine it, or you should whatever the thing is. And ideally you've done that research to go, all right, well, if I scale like this, and depending on my volumes, I should be making bigger investments into tooling or into equipment or into processes or whatever it is. So design for manufacture should be a consideration. Design for service and maintainability should be a consideration. When you're looking at the design of your product, trying to figure out, well, is the cost more important, like the unit cost more important than the maintenance cost? Or is the which one? What's the driver? You need to figure out what the priorities are, and obviously it's going to be different for every context. But you should always be considering those kind of key things. Yeah.
Awesome, Tim. It's been a pleasure. I could talk all day.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
It's been awesome. I think as you say, we've got this sovereign imperative to help make our economy more complex, so that we've got better jobs for the future. Like you, I've got young kids, so thinking about that, and it's great to think about the opportunity of manufacturing in this country. It's there's new technologies are coming down the pipe, as you say, present so much opportunity if we seize it.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me, and for everyone that's on the call. If you are developing a hardware product, please keep going. What you're doing is really, really important. Our nation needs what you're doing. And certainly from my perspective, if there's anything, obviously, there are probably not many people on the call from the Sunshine Coast. It's not like we're a big part of the country, but if there is anything that we can do to help, or if you're not from within our region, but you need trusted people to talk to about stuff, then get in touch, and, I can make some connections. And it won't always work out, but that's just the nature of trying these things. So yeah, but I think overall what you're doing is really, really important. Please keep going.
Awesome. And even if you're not from the Sunshine Coast and you're looking for partners, I'm sure you've got a ton of people there that love to work with businesses from around Australia, providing services and support to them.
Absolutely. There's so many great manufacturers up here that do a whole bunch of fantastic things, whether it's their own products or they're just providing broader services like, laser cutting, welding, powder coating, whatever. So yeah, hit us up and we can make some connections.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks so much, Tim. Well, next session on the 17th of October, I'm so pleased to be able to have Jasmine Hyde on the show. Jasmine has a fabulous little agency supporting founders and businesses to get PR and their marketing message out there. And I think you'll find Jasmine is an absolute joy to talk to. She's really got this forward-facing view of where marketing is going, and I think that's one of the big challenges in the communication space at the moment, is marketing is changing so massively. The old templates that used to work are not working anymore. It's much harder to get attention now than it was just a few years ago, just because of the volume of people that are competing with that attention. If you're on LinkedIn, you know exactly what I mean. So it's super exciting to have Jasmine on the show. And of course, if you've got any founders out there that are looking for more clarity, a lot of things that we've talked about today, whether you're in the software or the hardware space, whether you're trying to raise capital, build a product, figure out if you've got a commercially viable business model hypothesis. If you want a lot more clarity, then we have a fabulous offering called a Startup Builder Strategy Session. In just 3 hours, we'll give you immense clarity on exactly what it takes to take an idea to a commercially successful startup. Even if you've got a product in market and you're struggling with traction, we can help you get the clarity of what you need to do. So you can book that session there, or if you just want to chat, not ready for that sort of session, but you'd like to have more of a chat, you can connect with me, and happy to jump on a call and support any founders in your journey, because just as Tim said, we need founders building businesses here, creating jobs, and building the future of the country. Thanks so much again. Look forward to the next session. Tim, thanks so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers.